Imagine sitting in the most expensive restaurant in town, when a billionaire grandmother, known for her icy heart, suddenly bursts into tears. But it wasn't the food, or the music, or even the people around her, it was the old, worn-out necklace hanging from a young waitress's neck. A necklace that carried memories she thought were buried forever. What happened next stunned the entire room. The Willow Creek Cemetery sat on a low hill just outside town, where the river widened and slowed as if catching its breath before drifting past the old mills. Mornings smelled like damp stone and turned earth. Evenings carried the tang of cut grass and fallen oak leaves. By the second week of April, everyone in Willow Creek knew there was something wrong with one grave in particular, the new one under the leaning oaks, the one with the temporary aluminum marker staked into the soil, Sarah Grant, beloved wife. It started with a single tabby cat that came at dusk and sat perfectly still on the mound, eyes on the sky. Then there were 3, then 5, then a shifting ring of strays in every color the streets could breed. They clawed at the dirt in frantic bursts, then froze, then tipped their faces upward and let out a sound that wasn't quite a yell and wasn't quite a cry, thin, keening threads of noise that made even the groundskeeper cross himself and walk the long way around. By the 4th evening, folks from the riverside and the mill side were detouring through the cemetery just to witness it. Some whispered prayers. Some videotaped. Most left quickly, unsettled in a way they couldn't name. 1,000 miles away, Adam Grant stared at the email from his mother and tried to make the words sit still. It was sudden. The service is done. Don't jeopardize your assignment. There's nothing you can change now. The message was practical the way a storm alert is practical, and it made him feel the same, like something bigger than him had moved across his life without asking permission. On the last call before the silence, Sarah had been barefoot in their kitchen, laughing low because the neighbors upstairs kept out hours. She had told him she was late, then very late, then sure. I bought the cheap test and the real test, she'd said, that smile in her voice that could steady him when nothing else did. Both say the same thing. Adam, we're going to be parents. He remembered how he'd leaned his forehead against the hotel window, watching planes drift like sleepy birds over an unfamiliar skyline, promising he'd be home between rotations, promising he'd find a way to shorten the year. They'd argue gently about baby names until the call dropped. Now his mother was telling him it was over. She didn't suffer, the follow-up text read. Trust me to handle things here. But trust had a weight to it, and he felt it slipping out of his hands. He flew home on the first flight he could find, head thick with stale air and the metallic taste of fear. Willow Creek rose to meet him the way small towns do, with streets that remembered your childhood turns and storefronts that pretended nothing changed. The river was still the river. The diner still burned the toast. His mother's house still smelled like furniture polish and lemon dish soap and the faintest trace of the perfume she'd worn since he was 12. Zara Bennett opened the door with a smile arranged like a play setting. She was composed, handsome, 58 and precise about it. Grief did not muss her. Oh, Adam, she said, and her voice poured warmth without ever quite touching him. You shouldn't have come in the middle of a contract. It's all handled. Handled how? He asked, and his own voice sounded strange to him, too loud against the polished wood and the framed photographs of better seasons. Sarah's gone, Zara said gently, as if the softness could blunt the blade. It was complications. Quick. The hospital called me. I signed what needed signing. We buried her yesterday, just family. She touched his sleeve. I didn't want you to see her like that. He thought of Sarah as she always was, cardigan sleeves pushed to her elbows, hair twisted into a loose knot that would slip and fall by evening, hands that smelled like dish soap and rosemary from the community kitchen where she stacked donations every Thursday. He thought of how Alley Cat stopped hissing when she set down scraps, how the dog on Maple Street, mean to everyone, went quiet when she passed. Nothing about her could be squared with quick endings and closed-door decisions. I want to see where she is, he said. Zara's smile thinned, the way a candle thins under a draft. There's no comfort in that, honey. Remember her here. She gestured at a framed photo on the mantel, Sarah's head tucked under Adam's chin at Lake Esme, both of them windblown and sunburned and certain. "Where?" he repeated, not moving. A minute later she gave him the name, Willow Creek Cemetery, the older side, near the oaks, and a tight hug he did not return. "Don't make this harder on yourself," she murmured. The cemetery road crunched under his tires. He parked crooked, as if the car might decide to run, and followed the gravel path past angels with softened faces and family plots crowded with names that had anchored the town for a century. He found Sarah by the oaks because he found the cats first, 6 of them, scattered like punctuation across the grass. One pawed the soil and leapt back as if shocked. Another sat at the foot of the marker and stared at him, unblinking. The marker looked wrong to him, too temporary, too impersonal, a borrowed nameplate stuck into the earth with a bent stake. The dates were right, the letters neat. The mound was still high and damp. Someone had watered the grass seed that morning. A bouquet of supermarket lilies lay just off-center, petals browning at the edges. "Hey," he said, which was ridiculous, but he said it anyway, to the cats, to the ground, to whatever part of Sarah could receive a word. His knees went soft, and he let them. The earth was cool through his jeans. Somewhere a mower droned. Somewhere a pickup door slammed. He put his palm on the dirt, and tried to find her with whatever sense is left when the 5 official ones have failed. A woman in a pink windbreaker paused a respectful distance away. "You her husband?" she asked, soft as quilt batting. Adam nodded. The woman tipped her chin at the cats. "They've been like that since last night. Breaking my heart, honest to God. I've been walking this hill 20 years, never seen anything like it." "What do you think it means?" he heard himself ask, because meaning felt like the only handhold he could imagine. She pressed her mouth thin. "Some say animals know badness. I don't believe that. I think they know wrongness. When something ain't as it ought to be." He watched one of the cats dig, then look skyward, mouth open on a sound so thin it could thread a needle. He remembered how Sarah once whispered a stray into her lap outside the grocery store. No food, no tricks, just patience and a voice like a secret. The cat had come as if it had been waiting to be asked. "Thank you," he told the woman, and when she moved on he stayed, letting time stretch until the shadows of the oaks grew long and the ground cooled under his hand. He tried to picture the hospital room his mother had mentioned, but his mind kept replacing it with their kitchen and the blue cardigan and 2 cheap plastic tests lined up like tiny white boats on the bathroom's sink. He tried to build the shape of a day where Sarah's laughter had simply stopped. His mind refused. The cat's cries stitched through the hour, and something inside him caught the rhythm, a call and response older than language. By the time the groundskeeper came to chain the gate, Adam knew 2 things with the humiliating clarity of grief. He could not accept what he'd been told, and he would not be able to sleep unless he stood in the place where certainty should live. He rose slowly, palms gritty, and read her name again in the fading light. The marker didn't answer. The cats fell silent one by one, as if some unseen conductor had lowered his hand. On the walk back to the car, his phone buzzed with a text from Zara, "Please come home. I made soup." He stared at the screen until it dimmed, then turned the phone face down on the passenger seat and watched the cemetery gate in his headlights. He wasn't sure yet what he was waiting for, permission, a sign, some inward tilt where fear becomes resolve. But as the night thickened and the hill went dark, he felt something uncoil in his chest, something stubborn and old as the river, and he knew that whatever this was, it wasn't finished. The night after Adam's visit to the cemetery, sleep came in fits, shallow and jagged. He drifted for minutes at a time, then jerked awake, drenched in sweat. Each time he closed his eyes, Sarah appeared, trapped somewhere he couldn't reach, her hair tangled, her hands outstretched, calling his name in a hoarse whisper, "Help me, Adam. Please. Don't let me die here." The images were so sharp that when he woke, his chest ached as though he'd been running. By dawn, the world outside looked washed and ordinary, the mail truck humming past, the neighbors' sprinklers misting the sidewalks. But Adam's own world felt cracked. He sat at the kitchen table in his childhood home, watching his mother move around the stove, stirring oatmeal as if she had always been the one to cook for him. The clatter of the spoon against the pot was steady, deliberate. Too steady. You need to eat, Zara said, setting a bowl in front of him, her eyes studying him over the steam. Starving yourself won't bring her back. I dreamed about her, he said quietly, not touching the spoon. She was alive. Zara paused, then gave a soft, practiced sigh. Dreams are cruel that way. They give you back what you've lost, only to take it away again. But Adam wasn't convinced. Sarah's voice in the dream hadn't sounded like memory, it had sounded like presence. Raw. Immediate. As if she were speaking through something thin but real. He pushed back from the table. I want to see her medical papers. The death certificate. Something official. Zara's hands stilled on the counter. Adam, what for? You'll only torture yourself. It was natural, tragic but natural. There's nothing hidden. He noticed how quickly she reached for finality, how smooth the explanation rolled off her tongue, as though it had been practiced. He didn't argue. Instead, he excused himself, went upstairs, and sat on the edge of his old bed, mind whirling. He couldn't shake the feeling that the cats weren't there to condemn Sarah, but to point him toward a truth. That night, unable to bear the silence of the house, he drove back to Willow Creek Cemetery. The gate was closed, but the chain was loose enough to slip through. His flashlight cut a narrow path through the dark, and again he found the mound under the oaks. The cats were waiting. 7 of them now, their eyes glowing like tiny lanterns in the beam. They shifted aside as he knelt, as though making room. His hands shook as he dug. At first, he told himself it was madness, grief clawing at reason. But the deeper he went, the more the earth seemed to loosen under his palms, as if it wanted him to reach what lay below. His fingers hit wood. He froze, heart pounding. The coffin was smaller than it should have been, lighter than he expected. When he pried the lid open, the beam of his flashlight caught satin, lace, and then something horribly wrong. There was no Sarah. Instead, a mannequin lay inside, clothed in a burial dress, its stiff hands folded, a plastic wig stitched to its head. Someone had gone to the trouble of making the illusion of a body, but not the body itself. Adam staggered back, bow rising in his throat. His chest hammered, and the flashlight slipped, rolling across the dirt until its beam shot upward into the branches. The cats wailed as if echoing his horror. The world tilted around him. Everything his mother had told him unraveled in that instant, leaving behind only one unshakable truth: Sarah hadn't been buried. Which meant Sarah was still out there. Somewhere. And Zara knew exactly where. For 2 days Adam lived inside a storm of silence. He said little, ate less, and let his mother think his grief had muted him. Zara moved about the house in deliberate rhythms, watering her potted plants, folding laundry that didn't need folding, checking her watch more often than she thought he noticed. Her eyes softened whenever she looked at him, but beneath the softness something flickered, something guarded. On the 3rd night, long after midnight, Adam sat in the darkened living room, pretending to doze in a chair near the window. He heard the faint creak of floorboards, the slow click of the front door unlocking, and the muffled snap of it closing again. His mother's footsteps moved down the walk and disappeared. Hard hammering, Adam slipped out behind her, staying to the shadows. The moon lit the path just enough to track her as she moved through narrow streets toward the edge of town where old mansions slumbered, relics of families who once ruled Willow Creek. She stopped at one, tall red-bricked, with balconies rusting into ruin. Adam recognized it instantly, his mother's ancestral home, the estate she had been cut off from decades ago. Zara knelt near the gate, reached into a hollow brick, and drew out a heavy iron key. She slipped inside as if returning to a place that had always belonged to her. Adam scaled the side wall, dropping silently into the overgrown yard. He followed her through a side door she left ajar. The mansion's air was stale, thick with dust and the ghost of old perfume. Her flashlight carved narrow tunnels of light across cracked wallpaper and warped wood. She stopped in what had once been the music room, its piano long gone but the outlines still visible in dust on the floor. Slowly, she pushed aside a Persian rug. Beneath it was a trapdoor. She unlocked it with a smaller key from her coat pocket and began to descend. Adam's breath came shallow as he crept closer. Each stair groaned beneath her weight, but she moved with the certainty of habit. When she disappeared into the dark below, Adam followed, one hand on the wall, the other gripping his phone for light. At the bottom stretched a concrete cellar, damp and narrow, with a low ceiling. A single bulb dangled from frayed wires, casting a weak glow. Against the wall stood a cot. And on the cot, pale and trembling, was Sarah. Her wrists were bound with nylon cord, her face hollowed by exhaustion, her belly round beneath a stretched sweater. She lifted her head slowly, eyes widening at the sight of Zara standing over her. "You thought he'd come for you," Zara said, her voice smooth and cutting. She tapped a stack of deeds and papers laid out on a metal table. "But Adam believes you're already in the ground. The whole town believes it. The cats did my work for me, proof enough you were damned. All you need to do now is sign these over, and maybe you'll get to see daylight again." Sarah's lips trembled, but her voice was steady. "He'll come. He'll find me. I know he will." And from the shadows at the edge of the cellar, Adam stepped forward. His voice broke the silence like a blade. "He already has." The single light bulb swung slightly, throwing long shadows across the cellar walls. Zara stiffened, her face paling before she forced a smile that cracked at the edges. "Adam," she whispered, voice trembling between surprise and control. "You shouldn't be here. You don't know what you've stumbled into." "I know enough," Adam said, moving quickly to Sarah's side. He crouched, cutting through the nylon cord with his pocket knife, his hands shaking as he touched her skin. Sarah winced but clung to him, her fingers digging into his sleeve as though to prove he was real. Zara stepped forward, her voice rising, edged with desperation. "She's not what you think she is. She's poisoned your life. She was born from a family that ruined ours. Everything they had should have been mine. Don't you see? She's the reason you'll never know peace." Adam stood, placing himself between Sarah and his mother. His eyes burned with a fury she had never seen in him before. "No. The only poison here is the lies you've been feeding me. You buried a doll and told the world my wife was dead. You wanted me to believe she was cursed, damned, anything to keep me from looking deeper. But I did. And now I see you for what you are." Zara's composure snapped. "I did what I had to," she shouted, her voice echoing against the concrete. "Your grandfather cast me out, stripped me of everything because I loved a man he didn't choose. I went from silks to rags overnight. Do you know what it's like to go from ruling over a house to scrubbing someone else's floor? I swore I'd take back what was mine. And when Sarah became the last heir, I knew she would sign it over or you'd bury her alive." Adam cut in, his voice cold as steel. The words hung in the air like smoke. For the first time, Zara faltered. Her hands trembled, her mouth worked soundlessly before she tried again to mask it with anger. "You're my son," she hissed. "I did this for you. For us. That estate should belong to our family, not to hers." Adam shook his head slowly, tightening his grip around Sarah. "Family isn't stolen, Mom. Family is built. And you just destroyed yours." With Sarah leaning against him, Adam guided her toward the steps. Every board groaned, every breath of air felt like a fight against the suffocating cellar. Behind them, Zara's voice cracked into a scream. "You'll regret this, Adam! You'll regret choosing her over me!" But Adam didn't look back. He pushed open the trapdoor, carried Sarah into the dust-filled halls, and out into the sharp bite of night air. The drive to St. Luke's Medical Center blurred into fragments, streetlights flicking past like watchful eyes, Sarah's faint murmurs of pain, the taste of iron in Adam's mouth from clenching his teeth too hard. At the ER doors, nurses rushed to lift Sarah onto a gurney. A doctor barked orders, checking vitals, scanning her with quick, practiced movements. Adam hovered, hands trembling, unable to let go even as professionals worked. "She's weak, dehydrated, but she's alive," the doctor finally said, meeting Adam's eyes. "And so is the baby. You brought her in time. Adam sagged against the wall, relief breaking through like sunlight after weeks of storm. He bowed his head, whispering a prayer he hadn't dared speak aloud since Sarah's supposed death. When he was allowed to see her again, Sarah reached for his hand, her eyes rimmed with tears. "She said you believed her," she whispered. "That the cats proved I was a monster." Adam pressed her fingers to his lips. "She underestimated both of us," he said softly. "And maybe those cats weren't condemning you at all. Maybe they were trying to warn me." 2 mornings after Sarah was admitted, sunlight spilled into the hospital room through blinds that hadn't been opened in days. Her cheeks had a little more color now, and the steady beeping of the monitor felt almost like music to Adam's ears. Yet when she asked for a pen and some papers, his stomach tightened. "Sarah, you need to rest," he said, pulling the tray closer to her bed. "I will," she murmured, her voice thin but certain. "But first I need to do this." She signed her name across a stack of documents a nurse had delivered earlier. Property deeds, legal transfers Zara had been pushing for long before any of this began. When she handed them to Adam, her hands trembled, but her gaze didn't. He flipped through the papers, disbelief hardening into anger. "You gave it to her? The mansion, the land, everything?" Sarah leaned back against the pillows, closing her eyes briefly. "I don't want her shadow in our lives anymore. If these papers buy us peace, then let her have her walls and her ghosts. We'll build something new, somewhere far away." Adam stared at her, torn between outrage and awe. Here was a woman who had been caged, starved, lied about, nearly erased, and yet, instead of clinging to revenge, she was willing to surrender what had sparked all the cruelty. Her strength was not in holding on, but in letting go. Later that day, Adam drove across town to Zara's townhouse. The building was polished, modern, its windows reflecting the late afternoon sun. Inside, Zara stood in her kitchen, a cup of coffee cooling on the counter. When Adam set the manila envelope down, she looked at it as though it were treasure fallen from the sky. "You got her to sign," she breathed, disbelief giving way to giddy triumph. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope, and saw Sarah's signature sprawled across the lines. "I knew you'd come around. You've finally chosen family." Adam's jaw tightened. His voice was quiet, but every word landed like stone. "No, Mom. I've chosen my family. Sarah. Our child. You wanted the estate more than you wanted us, and now you have it. Congratulations." Zara blinked, her mouth working as though to form an argument, but nothing came out. The victory she had chased for decades sat heavy in her hands, and yet the look in Adam's eyes told her she had lost something greater. As he turned to leave, she called after him, her voice cracking. "Adam, I did all this for you. So you'd have a future." He paused at the doorway, his shoulders stiff. "A future built on lies isn't one I want." Then he walked out, the door clicking shut like the final seal on a chapter either of them could undo. Outside, the evening air smelled of rain, fresh and clean. For the first time in weeks, Adam felt the weight on his chest ease. He had chosen his path, away from the graves, away from the mansion, away from the lies. And for the first time, he believed peace was possible.